Fantastic. Hi, everyone. I'm Dan. Welcome to my office. I work with the AI for Earth program at Microsoft, and today I'm going to be talking about some computer vision work in wildlife conservation. What I really want to do is get right to neat demos and fun pictures of animals, but I would get locked out of my office by my colleagues if I didn't spend one slide telling you what the AI for Earth program at Microsoft is. So I will do that first. If you search the web for Microsoft AI for Earth, you get something that looks like this. It says Microsoft invests $50 million in AI for Earth. I know that if you go to a big company's webpage and see this, you have no idea what this actually means. Does this mean we're buying carbon offsets? Does this mean we're building stuff? So I'm going to give you kind of my one slide breakdown of what AI for Earth is. Everything we do is to make cool stuff happen at the intersection of machine learning and environmental sustainability. And there's kind of two ways we do that. Think of about half of the program is basically a grants program that helps other people do great work at the intersection of machine learning and sustainability. A lot of what we give away is cloud compute credits. Sometimes we give away money also, but it's all to organizations that we want to help do great work on the cloud that involves machine learning sustainability. The other part of the program is people like me at Microsoft building tools to solve specific conservation or sustainability problems. So that's AI for Earth in a nutshell. And of course, there's a lot more. Happy to take questions about the program overall later. But now I want to dive into projects. I also want to say one more thing. I'm going to show you a couple of projects that are very specific to wildlife conservation. You're just getting my biased perspective because that's what I work on, and I'm an animal nerd. The AI for Earth program in general is much broader, working in all areas of sustainability. So I don't want everybody to walk away thinking AI for Earth is just about wildlife conservation. That said, let's talk about wildlife conservation.
Dan, can I just interrupt for a second?
Yeah, sure.
We just had a little request to, if you could speak just a little bit slower because it's an international audience.
I'm from the New York area. I have been accused of speaking quickly before. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for intervening.
No worries. Okay, carry on.
All right. So normally when I give the 45-minute version of this talk, or give or take, we talk about a whole bunch of problems that we work on at the intersection of computer vision and wildlife conservation. We talk about what each problem is all about and why it matters and why it's hard and what we're doing. I'm kind of giving you this as a teaser. You can ask me about all of these problems and all of these things later because this is the 10-minute version of the talk. So we're going to cut that down to 2 problems. And basically for each one, I'm going to show you a cool demo that we hope will be a nice discussion starter. And I'm going to tell you how you can get involved in the area in general or specifically with the tools that we're building. So let's talk about 2 problems in computer vision for wildlife conservation. The first one I want to talk about, something we're working a lot on, is species classification from handheld photos. And when I say handheld photos, I mean that a human being was holding a camera, generally pointing it in the direction of an animal and making at least some effort to focus the camera on that animal, as opposed to, for example, camera trap photos that we'll talk about in a little bit, or aerial photos. And the problem we want to solve sounds really simple. What is the animal in this picture? This problem actually turns out to be really hard, especially when we get out to way fine-grained wildlife classification. And it's also really important, but this is the 10-minute teaser version. So you're going to have to ask me later about why it's hard and why it's so important. What I'm going to do for right now is just show you a quick demo of what we're building. And I'm also going to use this as a way of kind of seeding the kinds of services that AI for Earth provides to the conservation technologists that we work with. So I'm going to flip over here for a second. So I'll give you a link to this demo later. I don't want everybody to go visit it while I'm demoing live. This is an online demo of our AI for Earth species classification API. So you can kind of guess what's going to happen. There's a whole bunch of pictures here. I'm going to click on one of them, and it's going to tell us what it is. These pictures are not from the data we use to train this model. These pictures all come from Bing Images. I'm going to reload the page a couple times just so that you know I didn't like cheat by stacking my favorite pictures at the top of the demo. How about Sarah shout out one of these, Stephanie, shout out one of these pictures that I should click on and have our system classify it.
The penguin?
The penguin. All right, let's go. Here we go. So we're demoing 2 things here. It's thinking about what animal is in this wildlife. It says yellow-eyed penguin. That's actually close. I think, maybe somebody can correct me. I think that's actually either a king or an emperor penguin, but I'm still going to call that a victory because it's pretty close. And it actually turns out the initial model we trained was actually a little short on penguin species and didn't have king or emperor penguins in it. However, I'm still going to call that a victory because it didn't call it a lion or a snake. I'll click on one more. How about this guy? Moose. Looks like a baby moose to me. So I think you get the idea, and I want to stress I'm demoing two things here. There's this specific model that we've built to classify species in images, and that's neat and it's fun, and there's an API that you can both play with this demo, you can upload your own photos to this demo, there's an API you can call to do this. In some ways, the more important thing I'm demoing here is that the infrastructure this web application sits on is exactly the same set of tools we provide to all of our AI for Earth Azure grantees. We want to give people tools that help them build things just like this on top of your own work on the Azure cloud. And we are dogfooding our own infrastructure here to service demos like this. So this is kind of a 2-for-1 kind of demo. Back to slides. All right, I'm going to show a couple more examples from this. So I mentioned you can upload your own photos. Right after we kind of released version 1 of our species classification API, one of the engineers who worked on the project took his camera out on a hiking trip in British Columbia. He took these, I'd say, fairly challenging pictures of a bald eagle and an American black bear that were classified correctly by our species classification API. I then took an equally ambitious journey around my house, taking pictures of my kids' stuffed animals, my dog. You see on the left there, my 8-year-old. All of you ecologists in the audience will be happy to hear that I am raising 2 budding ecologists. My 8-year-old is wild about penguins. He's just crazy about penguins and absolutely sure he wants to be a penguin ornithologist when he grows up. Our species classification API correctly classified his African penguin Humphrey, correctly classified his barn owl. And then you'll see on the right there, my ferocious golden retriever. You can tell she's ready to attack. She was classified, I would say correctly, as a gray wolf. There are no domestic dogs in our training data yet. We'll be adding that soon. And so this is one of those cases where deep learning got something as right as it could. You shouldn't necessarily expect that to happen all the time. But you can tell she's a ferocious wolf at heart. This is an image that a collaborator of mine at Microsoft spent an obscene amount of time making in Photoshop, where he Photoshopped the head of an elephant onto the body of a lion. Again, you shouldn't always expect machine learning to make sensible mistakes like this, but in fact, the top 2 hits from our species classification API are lion and bush elephant. And then lastly, I love to demo with animals. It's super fun to show pictures of animals, but the API also supports plants. So I walked around a woodsy area around Seattle and took pictures that were correctly classified as a red maple and a western skunk cabbage.
Sorry, can I interrupt?
Yeah, please.
It looks like the plant, it found it a lot easier to identify the plant based on those accuracies compared to the animals you were using before. Is that true? Why is that?
That is an excellent question. So the reality is confidence values that come from deep learning systems are notoriously unreliable, and they're not meaningless, but one should not take them too literally. And this is a huge open problem. It's very relevant to this area. A huge open problem in all of machine learning is getting confidence values you can believe. If I had to put a fine point on it, I'd say that these plants take up a much larger fraction of the image than the animals do, and there's probably something there. It's also probably fair to say that confidence values are very loose from most deep learning systems, and somebody will have 10 fantastic PhD theses on getting more reliable confidence values from deep learning systems.
So it's actually not
the honest answer is don't take them too literally.
Right, okay, so it's not a reflection on plants apparently being easier for machine learning to identify.
I would be cautious about making that jump. That's a great question. I don't have a great answer. That's a great paper by itself, and I don't have a great answer. I'd be cautious about making that particular jump.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I also love being interrupted, so everybody feel free to interrupt. And then just a quick sort of the one nerd out slide about what's behind this API for the machine learning folks in the audience. This is a Inception v4 Inception resonant ensemble that we trained in PyTorch. And on about 5,000 classes, we're at about 80% top 1, 90%, 95% top 5 accuracy, which is sort of around the state of the art. My goal here is not to tell you that we made like the best species classifier in the history of the world. Again, it's to show that we made a pretty good species classifier and used our own tools, the same tools we give away to AI for Earth grantees, to stand up a web service on it that other people can use. All right. Oh yeah, most important slide. How can you get involved working in this area if you're excited about this? You can go play with the demo I just showed you at aka.ms/species classification. I will warn you, if everybody on this call goes and types that URL in right now, I honestly have no idea what's going to happen. So just be warned, but maybe play with it later today. It is an API, not just a demo. So you can go to the webpage, you can ask us for an API key and build your own neat things. We want to see what people do with an API like this. And there's also, if you want to kind of try your hand from the machine learning side, there is a Kaggle competition run every year on data from iNaturalist that kind of has the same vibe as the demo I just showed you. And I encourage everybody to go play around with that and enter the competition. All right, one more demo I want to show you. Let's talk a little bit about camera traps, I think near and dear to the hearts of many folks on this call. Here, the problem we want to solve, of course, is again, very simple. Here's an image from a camera trap. What animals are in this picture? That sounds really easy, right? Well, as anybody who's ever played with this kind of data knows, these images are actually extremely challenging. So this is a super hard problem and it's super important. But again, the goal of this 10-minute talk is not to tell you why it's super hard and important. It's to show you a neat demo and get some discussion started. I do want to mention one bit of background about why this is hard for people who maybe haven't worked extensively with camera trap images. It's worth noting that a huge problem in camera trap images is that anywhere from 5% to 99.5% of images that camera traps collect are empty. And this is conservation biologists spend an exorbitant amount of time looking at empty images. Turns out the empty ones, sadly, are the ones you spend the most time on because you can stare at it forever thinking, what's here? There must be something here. So you can spend easily 99% of your time on empty images. And that'll be relevant in a second. I won't tell you all the other reasons that camera trap images are so hard. Instead, I'll talk about some things that we're doing in this space. So I'll argue that most machine learning problems no longer have anything to do with machine learning. They have to do with getting good labeled data available to machine learning people to work with. So toward that end, AI for Earth has partnered with Zooniverse and the University of Wyoming to set up an open data repository at lila.science. Everybody can go visit it and check out the data we have up there right now. This just came out a couple weeks ago, so we only have a few data sets, but we're trying to build some exciting critical mass here. And it does include a bunch of camera trap data. And again, I maintain this is the most important thing that we can do for the field right now, rather than tuning 1% more algorithm here and there, get some open data out there that machine learning people can play with. So go visit that. I'm also separating annotations from data a little bit. You know, when we get data from conservation biologists, we get images with species level labels. One bit of value we're adding as we post data to that repository is we are adding a whole bunch of bounding boxes around animals. That's what I'm calling annotations that make it easy to train detectors. So we're not just ingesting data, we're also adding some value to that data. These are manually added annotations that we're adding to all these data sets. And then what we're largely working on is training detectors and just a bit of machine learning terminology. If I say classifier, I mean, what is the thing in this image? If I say detector, I mean, is there a thing in this image? And if so, tell me where it is in the image. So there's a lot of folks focused on species classification for camera trap images. We've been focused really heavily on training detectors. That's why we added all of those annotations. And why do I think detectors are such an important piece of the camera trap puzzle? Well, number one, I told you, one of the biggest problems people have in this space is tons and tons of empty images. So a robust detector can be useful right away to just help people get rid of empty images. Also, we have found that detectors, a huge problem in species classification is that what works in one location doesn't necessarily work at all in another location, literally a mile away. Really sensitive to backgrounds and location, and of course, different species distributions. Detectors tend to generalize really well. I don't know if we'll get to a one-size-fits-all detector for the entire world, but we'll get fairly close to that. So building a detector now will pay off a lot of dividends in ecosystems everywhere. And of course, if you have a robust detector, you can crop the animal out and greatly simplify the classification problem down the road because you don't have to worry about, well, there's 10 different species in this image or there's variable background. Those are 3 reasons we're really focused on detectors right now. And I'm about to show you last demo for the day. We trained a detector that we're about to make publicly available. This one is trained in TensorFlow. It's faster CNN on an Inception ResNet v2 base. And I'm going to show you a little bit. I'm going to show you about 30 seconds of this video, which is a single detector running on, well, video is not playing. I'm going to come back to this later. I'll tell you what you would have seen in this video, and this is a publicly linked video. I'll send you a link to it later. There's going to be another demo, don't worry. This is a single detector, not running on images it was trained on, finding animals that look very different in ecosystems all over the world. And the point, again, is not we've built the best detector anyone's ever built. It's that detectors work really well on ecosystems all over the world. So for now, you have to take my word for it, but later in the discussion session, I'll make sure I post a link to this video that people can take a look at. Last thing I want to show is we have also built, again, true to our word of consuming our own dog food and standing up APIs on the same infrastructure that we give to our grantees. We built a preliminary API to host this detector and let people run it on their own camera trap images. So I'm going to go grab, you kind of have to, it's very hard for me to convince anybody that I haven't picked my favorite camera trap images to show you in this demo. So you're going to have to somewhat trust me on this. I have this directory full of camera trap images that were given to me by a conservation biologist here in the US from a region that was not included in our training data. And I'm just going to pick a bunch from this directory that have some combination of animals and no animals. So I picked 4 images. I'm uploading into our system. It's going to think, and I'll talk awkwardly for about 10 seconds while it thinks. Again, the point I'm making once again is not we've built the best detector ever in the world. It's we are trying to make it easy for people to build applications just like this on top of models, and also that detectors generalize pretty well to new regions. So I uploaded 4 images. It recognized this one is empty, this one is empty, found an animal in this one. I actually considered these images rather challenging, the one where the animal's like face right in the camera, and found an animal in this one. I think you get the idea. And again, this is on data that was not in our training data. So how can you get involved in this space? Again, please visit WildLabs.Science and start playing with the data we have up there. Also, for camera trap folks in the audience who want us to host our data, please go to WildLabs.Science and email me to start donating your data. The code we use to train that detector is open source at GitHub Microsoft Camera Traps. The demo I just showed you, we hope to release publicly and the API in a few weeks. And there's also, if you want to try your hand at machine learning in this space, there's a similar Kaggle competition run every year associated with the CVPR conference called iWildCam. That's a great opportunity to get in and play around with some camera trap data and try to win, because computer scientists love to win. And I'll stop there.
That was amazing. Thanks, Dan. So before we open up the discussion to all speakers, there are a couple of quite specific questions that I think people had for you.
Sure.
Who was our first? Karen, you wanted to ask something about cheetah footprints. Is that right? Karen?
Oh, I see such great questions here.
Yes, hi. No, just in general. So I'm working with Zoe's dual conservation footprint identification technique, where we have take footprint photos, photos of footprints to identify. I was just wondering if there was a similar species classification for footprints, sort of a general database, or you know.
It's a great question. I'm going to use this as a launching point to do another little bit of kind of AI for Earth branding. So she referred to Conservation Fit, an organization that uses computer vision to recognize both species and individuals on footprints of animals, which I think is really exciting work. I know Zoe well. That's a great example of what we'd like to do. We can't do every one of these machine learning problems, but what we really want to do, the Conservation Fit is a perfect example of the kind of organization we'd like to help get the great work that you've already done up onto the cloud and exposed as an API and a web service. And we work really closely with organizations to try to make that as seamless as possible and help people who haven't built web services before. So rather than trying to solve every machine learning problem ourselves, of course, advise and try to be helpful and give machine learning advice, but also really help organizations already doing work like that get live on the cloud. So I think Conservation Fit is a great example of the kind of organization we'd like to work with in that department.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thomas, Tom, do you want to jump in and ask a question about Microsoft and Wildlife Insights?
Sure, thanks, Steph. So my question, Dan, was just about the Microsoft image repository and how it relates to, or how it differs from Wildlife Insights and team and all of these other repositories?
An excellent question. I will say the goal of Lila.science is very different than, so Wildlife Insights is much more than a data repository. Or Wildlife Insights aims to be a place that biologists manage their images, where machine learning runs on their images, and a data repository. So it is a very, they have some very rich goals, and I think by all signs they'll get there soon. What we've built is something I think much simpler, which is a place to take archival, well-curated, labeled data and host those data sets and make them available to machine learning folks who want to work with data like this. So what Lila.science is not going to grow into is a place where biologists, there's no upload button. There's no upload one image, there's no manage my images. It is a set of curated archival data sets for people to work with to help move the machine learning side of things forward. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thanks, Dan. I think, was Dave going to jump on this one as well?
Yeah.
Was that about right, Dave? I think they hit different ends of the complete spectrum, and they're both really important and play nicely together.
Yeah, that's definitely right. And I wanted to add one interesting thing. This is reflects to another question that was asked earlier a little bit. The one thing that's really interesting to me is how these different machine learning models can interact. The one that's working on Wildlife Insights is camera trap focused, but if you look at iNaturalist photos, they're slightly different. And one thing that's one kind of problem for me that's interesting is how do we connect these different sort of minds, right? Like, let's say the Wildlife Insights model can't figure something out. It's not very confident. Can it then send it to the iNaturalist model, and then can iNaturalist then send that off to a citizen scientist? And how can the iNaturalist tell us what images it's willing to send to its citizen scientists, because it doesn't want to barrage them with, images of deer, right? So there's this whole kind of interesting ecosystem around these different models and how they can interact with each other in useful ways that I think is a place that's ripe for a lot of investigation.
Or even within camera traps, or even within East African camera trap models, there's going to be, if we all succeed in getting data out there, there's going to be 15 different East African camera trap models that are all great in different ways. And yes, an ecosystem is definitely necessary to help all of those play nicely. And I don't think that's 10 years away. That's in 2 years, there'll be 15 great open source models that classify camera trap images from East Africa, and getting them all to play nicely together is an exciting ecosystem challenge.
Right, it gets to data sharing and standards around, data discovery. It's great space.